The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street of Cedar Ridge, painting everything in shades of amber and rust. Boone Delaney stood outside the general store, his weathered Stetson pulled low against the glare, calloused hands resting on his gun belt. 3 months. 3 months of letters, each one carefully penned and cherished, had led to this moment. He pulled the latest letter from his vest pocket, the paper soft from repeated handling. Her handwriting was delicate, flowing like water across the page. Sati Quinn. Even her name sounded like music. She'd written about her love for wildflowers, her skill with herbs and healing, and her dreams of building a life out here in the untamed West. Most importantly, she'd agreed to be his bride. The ranch needed a woman's touch. Hell, he needed more than that. The loneliness had been eating at him these past 5 years since he'd claimed his land. The 160 acres weren't much, but they were his, carved out of this unforgiving landscape with sweat and determination. The small herd of cattle, the modest cabin, the dreams of something more, all of it would mean nothing without someone to share it with. A dust cloud appeared on the horizon, growing larger as the stagecoach approached. Boone's heart hammered against his ribs. He'd sent her the fare, along with his photograph and directions to Cedar Ridge. She'd sent hers too, a small tintype showing a young woman with dark hair and gentle eyes. He touched his shirt pocket where he kept it safe. The coach rumbled to a stop, wheels groaning and horses snorting. The driver, old Jake Morrison, climbed down and began unloading luggage. The door swung open, and Boone stepped forward, removing his hat. A woman emerged, her traveling dress dusty but still maintaining an air of elegance. Dark hair pinned up beneath a modest bonnet, eyes the color of prairie sage, skin fair despite the journey. She was even lovelier than her photograph had suggested. "Miss Quinn," Boone's voice came out rougher than intended. She smiled, descending with practiced grace. "Yes, I'm Sati Quinn." But before Boone could move forward, before he could take her hand or speak the welcome he'd rehearsed 100 times, another figure appeared in the coach doorway. Another woman, identical to the first in every way, the same dark hair, the same sage-green eyes, the same delicate features. She too wore a traveling dress, similar but not quite the same shade. She too carried herself with that particular grace. "I'm Sati Quinn," the second woman said, stepping down beside the first. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Boone blinked hard, wondering if the heat had finally gotten to him. But no. There stood 2 women, mirror images of each other, both claiming the name he'd been writing to for 3 months. There must be some mistake, he managed, looking between them. The first woman, or was she the second, shook her head. "No mistake, Mr. Delaney. I'm the woman you've been corresponding with." "That's impossible," the other interjected, her voice carrying a slight edge of steel beneath its sweetness. "I'm Sati Quinn. I have all your letters." Both women reached into their bags, producing bundles of correspondence. Boone recognized his own handwriting, his own words of hope and promise. His mouth went dry as dust. "Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private," he suggested, acutely aware of the curious stares from townsfolk gathering to witness this peculiar scene. The women exchanged a look, a complex communication that only those who shared blood could manage. The first nodded, her manner gentle and accommodating. The second lifted her chin, defiance flickering in her eyes. "My wagon's just there," Boone indicated, still reeling. "The ranch is about an hour's ride." As they loaded the luggage, 2 sets, perfectly matched leather cases. Boone's mind raced. In his letters, he'd shared details no one else could know. The scar on his left shoulder from a cattle drive gone wrong, his mother's maiden name, the nightmare that sometimes woke him, about finding his father's body after the Comanche raid. During the ride, he tried casual questions, hoping to solve this puzzle. "You mentioned your favorite flower in your 3rd letter," Prairie roses, both women answered in unison. Pink ones, like the bush behind your mother's grave in Missouri. His hands tightened on the reins. He'd told only Sati about that. The lullaby you said your grandmother sang. They began humming together, the melody perfect, harmonized. It was the very tune he'd written about, the one that reminded him of home. The ranch appeared as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the sparse grassland. It wasn't much, a 2-room cabin with a lean-to kitchen, a small barn, a corral for the horses. But it was honest work made manifest, every board and nail placed by his own hands. It's just as you described, one said softly. Every detail, the other added. And was that disappointment or approval in her voice? Inside the cabin, Boone lit the oil lamp and gestured for them to sit. The space suddenly felt too small, too intimate with these two mysteries filling it. I need to understand, he began, setting his hat on the table. How can you both be Sati Quinn? How can you both know things I wrote to only one woman? They sat side by side, identical down to the silver lockets at their throats, the way they folded their hands in their laps. Yet now that he looked closer, he could see differences. One had a softer set to her mouth, eyes that sought to soothe. The other held herself straighter, a subtle tension like a coiled spring. We need to tell him, the gentler one said. He deserves the truth, the other agreed. Though her jaw was set firm, we're sisters, they said together. Then the softer one continued alone. Twins, born just minutes apart. I'm Sati Quinn. And I'm Rosalie Dean, the other added, though that's not the name I was born with. Boone felt the chair creak as he leaned back. Then how? Someone has been playing a cruel game. Rosalie's voice turned hard. Using us, using you. But who would do such a thing? Sati asked, tears gathering in her eyes. Who would know enough about both of us to write those letters? The sound of horses approaching cut through the evening air. Multiple horses riding hard. Boone was on his feet instantly, hand moving to his Colt .45. Through the window, he saw 5 riders approaching in the dying light. At their head rode a man he knew too well, Thorne Shepard, owner of the largest spread in the valley, a man who'd made no secret of wanting Boone's land to complete his empire. Stay inside, Boone ordered, stepping onto the porch. Thorne reined up just outside the yard, his men flanking him. He was a handsome devil, Boone had to admit, with silver at his temples and clothes that spoke of money. But his smile never reached his eyes. Evening, Delaney. Thorne called out, casual as if paying a social call. Heard you had some visitors arrive today. Thought I'd come welcome them proper. That's mighty neighborly of you, Shepard, but we're fine. Thorne's smile widened. Oh, I think you might want to hear what I have to say. About mail-order brides and legal complications. You see, I've been doing some checking. Seems there might be some question about the validity of certain arrangements. Marriage contracts obtained through fraudulent means, for instance. Why? That could lead to all sorts of problems. Legal problems, the kind that might call into question a man's right to his land. You threatening me? Threatening. Thorne placed a hand over his heart in mock offense. Just offering friendly advice, a bachelor's claim to his homestead is one thing, but a man who's committed fraud, well, that's another matter entirely. The cabin door opened despite Boone's order. Both women stepped out, standing shoulder to shoulder. Thorne's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features before settling into something more calculating. Well, this is even more interesting than I thought. You know something about this, Rosalie stated. It wasn't a question. My dear ladies. Thorne touched the brim of his hat. I'm afraid you've been caught up in something unfortunate. But don't worry. I'm sure we can come to some arrangement. After all, I'm a reasonable man. The implied threat hung in the air like smoke. Boone's hand rested on his gun butt, but Thorne's men were already positioned, hands near their own weapons. "Get off my land, Shepherd." "Your land. Yes, for now." Thorne wheeled his horse around. "Ladies, when you tire of this situation, my door is always open. I could use some civilized company at my ranch, and I pay well for household help." They watched the riders disappear into the growing darkness. The evening had turned cool, a breeze carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. "He knows something," Sati whispered. "He knows everything," Rosalie corrected grimly. Boone turned to face them, these two women who were one and yet separate, who both somehow held pieces of his carefully written heart. The lamplight from inside cast their faces in gold and shadow, beautiful and mysterious and dangerous to everything he'd built. "Then I reckon we better figure out the truth," he said, "before Thorne uses it to destroy us all." The coyotes began their evening song in the distance, a wild and lonesome sound that seemed to underscore the strange hand fate had dealt. Three souls bound by letters and lies, standing together against the gathering dark of a West where law was weak and predators came in many forms. Inside the cabin, the bundle of letters lay on the table like evidence in a trial yet to come. Each word of love and hope now shadowed by deception. Each promise now a potential trap, but also, perhaps, a key to understanding who had orchestrated this elaborate game and why. Boone looked at the twins, Sati with her gentle sorrow, Rosalie with her fierce determination, and felt something shift in his chest. He'd waited for one bride and received two. Neither scenario was what he'd imagined during those long, lonely nights reading letters by lamplight. But then, the West had a way of taking a man's plans and scattering them like seeds to the wind. Sometimes what grew was nothing like what you'd planted. Sometimes it was something altogether more complicated. And sometimes, just sometimes, it might be exactly what you needed, even if you didn't know it yet. The oil lamp flickered as Boone spread the letters across the rough wooden table. Outside, the night had settled deep and dark over the prairie, with only the distant howl of coyotes breaking the silence. The twins sat across from him, their faces a study in contrasts despite their identical features. "Let's start from the beginning," Boone said, picking up the first letter. "This one arrived in May. You wrote about your father's mercantile in Independence." "Franklin's Dry Goods on 3rd Street," both women said simultaneously. Sati added softly, "The shop with the blue door and the bell that rang twice when you opened it." "Where Mama kept peppermint sticks in the glass jar by the register." Rosalie continued. Boone's brow furrowed. "You both know these details. Every last one." He selected another letter. "Here, you mentioned a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon." Without hesitation, both women pulled back their left sleeves, revealing identical marks on their wrists. "The fever you had when you were 7. "Scarlet fever," they chorused. "Doc Morrison said we wouldn't make it through the night." "But you did." Boone set down the letter, frustration evident in every line of his body. "Both of you, together." A heavy silence fell over the cabin. Finally, Rosalie spoke, her voice carrying an edge sharp as a skinning knife. "Someone who knew us intimately wrote those letters. Someone who had access to our memories, our dreams, our very souls." "But who?" Sati's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "And why use us this way? Why bring us here under false pretenses?" Boone stood abruptly, pacing the small space like a caged mountain cat. "Thorne Shepherd, he's wanted my land since the day I proved up on it. 160 acres might not seem like much, but it's got the best water access in the valley. His cattle have to travel 5 miles to reach the stream." "So he constructs an elaborate deception." Rosalie shook her head. "There are easier ways to steal land." "Not legally," Boone countered. "I've got clear title. No debts, no liens. But if he could prove I committed fraud, mail-order bride fraud, he could petition the territorial court, a man of his influence. He didn't need to finish. "We're pawns," Sati whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "Someone used our lives, our stories, to trap you." The sound of a horse approaching fast made them all freeze. Boone grabbed his rifle from beside the door, motioning for the women to move away from the windows. But the rider wasn't trying for stealth. They could hear labored breathing, both horse and human, as they thundered into the yard. "Delaney!" The voice was female, desperate. "Mr. Delaney, please!" Boone cracked the door, rifle ready. A woman practically fell from her mount, a carpet bag clutched in her arms. She was older, perhaps 50, with gray streaking her once dark hair. Her traveling clothes were dust-covered and torn. "Please," she gasped. "I rode straight through from Denver. They're dead, both dead." "Ma'am, slow down," Boone began. But the woman pushed past him into the cabin. The moment she saw the twins, she let out a cry that was part relief, part anguish. "Oh, my dear girls, my dear, dear girls." "Aunt Margaret." Sati stood slowly, disbelief written across her face. Rosalie remained seated, her expression guarded. "You're supposed to be in Denver, with Uncle Theodore." Margaret Whitmore sank into a chair, still clutching her bag. "Theodore's dead, shot 3 days ago. And Franklin?" She looked at the twins with haunted eyes. "Your father is gone too. The fever took him last month." "Papa!" Sati swayed, and Boone moved instinctively to steady her. "You're lying," Rosalie said flatly. "We would have heard. Someone would have written." "Who would have written?" Margaret's laugh was bitter. "I'm all you have left, and I've been running for my life." She opened the carpet bag, revealing a stack of papers. "But I brought these, evidence of what they did, what I helped them do. God forgive me." Boone lit another lamp, casting more light on the scene. "Ma'am, I think you'd better explain everything, from the beginning." Margaret's hands shook as she smoothed out the papers. "Your father, Franklin, he wasn't just a shopkeeper. He had a weakness for cards and dice. The debts piled up, especially after your mother passed. He hid it well, but the creditors were circling like vultures." "No." Sati shook her head. "Papa would never." "He mortgaged everything. The shop, the house, even borrowed against your dowries." Margaret's voice cracked. "When he couldn't pay, they came to him with a proposition. Use his daughters to secure land rights in Wyoming territory. Rich land, water rights, mineral possibilities." Rosalie's face had gone pale as parchment. "He sold us!" "Not sold, traded, leveraged." Margaret pulled out a document. "This is the contract. In exchange for clearing Franklin's debts, you were to be married to certain landowners. Strategic marriages. They called it, but you girls were too strong-willed. You'd never agree to it. So they forged letters from us," Rosalie said, the pieces falling into place. "Used our lives, our memories, to create a perfect deception." "I helped," Margaret admitted, tears streaming down her face. "God help me, I helped write those letters. I knew you girls better than anyone. Every story, every detail. They said it was the only way to save Franklin, to save the family name." Boone studied the contract, his expression darkening. "Thorne Shepard's signature is on this. He orchestrated everything. He has partners back east, powerful men who trade in debts and lives." Margaret pulled out another paper. "But there's more. Your father discovered what was happening. He tried to stop it. That's why—" She choked on the words. "That's not fever that killed him. They poisoned him, made it look natural. The cabin erupted." Sati let out a sob, burying her face in her hands. Rosalie shot to her feet, rage blazing in her eyes. "You helped them murder our father?" "I didn't know, I swear on your mother's grave. I didn't know until it was too late. When I tried to back out, they came for Theodore. Made it look like a robbery. Margaret grasped Rosalie's hands. I rode here to warn you. They'll come for you too. All of you. Shepard can't leave witnesses. Boone set the papers aside, his jaw set. How long do we have? Days. Maybe less. Shepard has men everywhere. The law here answers to him. Not all the law, Boone said quietly. There's a federal marshal in Cheyenne, Nathan Pierce. He's straight as they come. 2 days' ride, Rosalie calculated. 3, if we take the wagon. Boone looked at her. You think we're leaving after what we've just learned? Fire danced in Rosalie's eyes. They killed our father, used us like livestock, and you think we'll run? It's not safe. Nothing about this has been safe, Sati interrupted, surprising them with the steel in her usually gentle voice. But Rosalie's right. We won't run, not from this. Margaret slumped in her chair. You don't understand. Shepard has legal documents. Forged, yes, but convincing. He can claim you entered into marriage contracts fraudulently. He can take everything. Let him try, Boone said grimly. This is my land. I earned it fair and square. A rifle shot shattered the window, sending glass spraying across the floor. Everyone dove for cover as more shots followed, peppering the walls. Shepard's men. Boone growled, returning fire through the broken window. So much for having days. The twins had taken shelter behind the overturned table. Margaret cowered near the stove, clutching her bag of evidence. The gunfire was measured, deliberate, not meant to kill but to terrorize. Delaney, Thorne's voice carried across the yard. No need for anyone to get hurt. Just send out the ladies and we'll call it square. Go to hell, Shepard. Already been there. Found it profitable. Thorne's laugh was cold. You're outgunned and outmaneuvered. Those women are the key to a fortune in land and mineral rights. You're just a speed bump on the road to progress. Rosalie grabbed a pistol from Boone's gun belt. I can shoot. Papa taught us both. This isn't target practice. She fired through the window, and a man's curse told them she'd found her mark. I'm a quick study. The siege settled into a rhythm. Sporadic gunfire, taunts from Thorne, the occasional probe to test their defenses. The cabin, built solid against winter storms, held up well against bullets, but they all knew it was only a matter of time. There's something else, Margaret whispered during a lull. Something about this land, your land, Mr. Delaney. Boone reloaded his rifle. What about it? The surveys, the mineral surveys from last year, they found something, not gold, but copper, rich veins of it, worth a fortune if the railroad comes through. Railroad's going to Laramie, Boone said. Unless someone owns enough land to make it worth their while to change routes. Margaret's eyes glittered in the lamplight. Connect the dots. Mr. Delaney, your water rights. The Baxter spread to the north, the old Comanche trail that makes a natural rail bed. Put it all together. And you've got an empire, Boone finished, with my land as the cornerstone. Another volley of shots interrupted them, but this time they heard return fire from a different direction. Riders were approaching from the east, their guns blazing. Federal marshals, a new voice rang out. Drop your weapons in the name of the law. The shooting intensified, but now Thorne's men were caught in a crossfire. Boone risked a look and saw uniformed riders charging into the yard, badges glinting in the moonlight. Nathan made better time than expected, he muttered, then called out, In here, Marshal. We've got evidence of murder and fraud. The battle was brief but vicious. Thorne's men, caught off guard, scattered into the darkness. Some were captured, others fled. When the smoke cleared, Marshal Nathan Pierce himself stood in the doorway, a tall man with shrewd eyes and a week's worth of trail dust. Boone Delaney, he said, touching his hat brim. Got your message. Interesting timing, considering I was already investigating Thorne Shepard for land fraud in Colorado. Marshal, Boone gestured to the others. These ladies have quite a story to tell. And Mrs. Whitmore here has evidence. Pierce's eyes widened as he took in the twins. Well, I'll be damned. Pardon my language, ladies. This is shaping up to be more interesting than I thought. As Margaret began laying out the papers, as the twins added their testimony, as the truth began to build like a thunderhead on the horizon, Boone felt something shift. The danger wasn't over. Thorne was still out there, and the legal battles ahead would be fierce, but they had a chance now. Truth and the law on their side. He caught Rosalie's eye as she spoke passionately about their father. She gave him the slightest nod, a warrior's acknowledgement between fighters. Then he looked at Sati, saw her quiet strength as she comforted her aunt despite her own pain. Two women where he'd expected one, a conspiracy where he'd hoped for love. And yet, standing in his shot-up cabin with federal marshals taking statements and justice finally showing its face, Boone felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. Not for the simple life he'd imagined, but for something more complex, more dangerous, and possibly more real than any letter could have promised. The West had a way of testing people, of burning away pretense and leaving only truth. And sometimes that truth was stranger than any lie. Sometimes it was exactly what you needed, even if it came wrapped in gunsmoke and deception. The night was far from over, but for the first time since the twins had stepped off that stagecoach, Boone Delaney felt like he might just survive it. All of them might. The morning sun revealed the damage from the night's battle. Bullet holes pocked the cabin walls like deadly flowers, and broken glass crunched underfoot. Marshal Pierce had set up a temporary headquarters in Boone's barn, where two of Thorne's captured men sat shackled and sullen. "We need to move fast," Pierce said, studying the documents Margaret had provided. "Thorne Shepard won't stay hidden long. Men like him have too much pride to run far." Rosalie stood by the barn door, keeping watch with Boone's rifle. The morning light caught the determination in her eyes, reminding Boone of a hawk scanning for prey. "He'll come back. He has too much invested in this scheme to abandon it now." "She's right," Margaret said quietly. She'd aged years overnight, the weight of her confession etching new lines on her face. "Thorne isn't just after land. This goes deeper. There are investors back east, powerful men who've bankrolled his operations. They won't accept failure." Pierce looked up sharply. "Names, Mrs. Whitmore. I need names." Margaret pulled out a small leather journal from her carpet bag. "I kept records, every meeting, every transaction. I thought I was protecting my family." Her voice broke. "Instead, I helped destroy it." Sati moved to comfort her aunt, but Rosalie remained rigid by the door. The differences between the sisters had become more pronounced through the crisis, Sati's compassion softening her edges while Rosalie's anger sharpened hers to knife points. "Judge Cornelius Blackwood in Denver." Margaret read from her journal. "Senator Marcus Webb's brother-in-law. Railroad surveyor Thomas Crenshaw. They're all connected, all profiting from Thorne's land grabs." "This is bigger than we thought," Pierce muttered. "I'll need to wire Washington, get more marshals out here." "How long will that take?" Boone asked. "Days, maybe a week." "We don't have a week," Rosalie said flatly. "Thorne knows we have evidence now. He'll either run or come at us with everything he's got," as if summoned by her words. One of the captured men started laughing. Jake Morrison, a grizzled gun hand with dead eyes, spat tobacco juice through the barn slats. "You folks got no idea what's coming. Thorne's got 50 riders heading this way from his Colorado operation. They'll be here by nightfall." Pierce backhanded him casually. "Then you'd better start talking about their plans." "Don't matter what I say." Morrison grinned through bloody teeth. "You can't stop what's coming. Thorne owns this territory. The law, the land, the very air you breathe. You're already dead. You just don't know it yet." Boone stepped forward, but Rosalie beat him to it. She pressed the rifle barrel against Morrison's temple, her voice deadly quiet. "My father is dead because of men like you. Give me one reason not to paint this barn with your brains."
"Rosalie,"
Sati gasped.
"Miss, step back,"
Pierce commanded. But Rosalie didn't move. "As you want to know something funny?" Morrison's grin widened. "Your daddy figured it out, the whole scheme. That's why Thorne had to poison him. But the real joke, he weren't your real daddy anyway. Your mama had secrets of her own." Rosalie's finger tightened on the trigger, but Boone's hand covered hers, gently pushing the barrel away. "He's trying to rile you. Don't give him the satisfaction." She met his eyes, and for a moment, the fury in them nearly took his breath away. Then she stepped back, lowering the weapon. "Smart girl." Morrison chuckled. "Though it won't matter. You'll all be burning by—" Pierce's fist cut him off mid-sentence, dropping him unconscious. "I've heard enough. We need to prepare defenses." They spent the morning turning Boone's ranch into a fortress. Pierce deputized Boone and sent riders to neighboring homesteads, calling for help. Most were too frightened of Thorne to respond. But a few brave souls arrived. Old Sam Washington with his buffalo rifle, the Hendricks brothers who'd lost their own spread to Thorne's machinations, and, surprisingly, Maria Santos, the Mexican woman who ran the boarding house in town. "That bastard killed my husband last year," Maria said simply, checking her pistols. "Called it a bar fight, but I know better." Margaret worked with Sati to prepare medical supplies, tearing sheets for bandages and boiling water. The older woman's hands shook as she worked. "I remember when you girls were born," she said softly. "Your mother was so proud. Twins," she said, "were a double blessing." She paused. "What Morrison said about your father was a lie," Sati said firmly. "Papa loved us. That's all that matters." But Rosalie, overhearing from across the room, had a different reaction. "What if it wasn't? What if everything we believed was false? Then we make our own truth," Boone said, surprising them all. He'd been reinforcing the windows, but had heard the exchange. "Family isn't just blood. It's choice. It's standing together when the world's against you." The afternoon brought scouts, riders who appeared on distant ridges, watching, counting, reporting back to their master. The defenders worked in tense silence, everyone knowing the storm was building. It was Sati who voiced what they were all thinking. "Even if we survive this, what then the contracts, the fraud?" "Are void," Pierce interrupted. "Based on forgery and coercion, no court would uphold them." He paused. "The question is whether we'll live long enough to see a courtroom." As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, they saw the dust cloud approaching from the north. 50 riders, just as Morrison had promised. At their head rode Thorne Shepherd, sitting his horse like a general reviewing troops. "Everyone to positions," Pierce commanded. They'd turned the cabin and barn into interlocking fields of fire. Every window had a defender. Every approach was covered. But looking at the army approaching, Boone felt the cold weight of probable death settling on his shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said quietly to the twins as they took positions by the eastern windows. "This isn't what I intended when I sent for a bride." "No," Sati said, checking her rifle. She'd learned quickly under Rosalie's tutelage. "It's not what any of us intended, but maybe it's what we needed." "To die defending a stranger's land?" Rosalie asked sharply. "To find something worth fighting for," Sati countered. "To discover who we really are when all the pretenses are stripped away." Thorne's force stopped just outside rifle range. The man himself rode forward under a white flag, arrogant even in parley. "Marshal Pierce," he called out. "I'm a reasonable man. Turn over the women and the documents, and I'll let the rest of you ride out. You have my word." "Your word isn't worth the breath it takes to speak it," Pierce shouted back. Thorne's smile was visible even at distance. Then let me make it simpler. I have legal documents showing these women entered into binding contracts, marriage contracts, labor contracts, debt transfers, all properly witnessed and filed. All forged, Pierce countered. Prove it. In the meantime, I'm within my rights to collect my property. We are not property. Rosalie's voice rang out like a bell. We are not cattle to be traded for gambling debts. Ah, Miss Dean, or is it Miss Quinn? Even you can't seem to decide who you are. Thorne's voice carried mock sympathy. Your father sold you, my dear, legally and bindingly. The fact that you're twins just makes it more interesting. Double the value, you might say. Margaret appeared at a window. Franklin Quinn was murdered. You poisoned him when he tried to stop this. Prove it, Thorne repeated. Dead men tell no tales, and desperate women spin many. The law requires evidence, not accusations. Then let's discuss evidence. A new voice called out. Everyone turned to see a rider approaching from the east, a single man on a lathered horse, badge glinting in the dying light. Judge Harold McKenna, Pierce breathed. Federal Circuit Judge. What's he doing here? The judge, a man in his 60s with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, rode past Thorne's men as if they didn't exist. He stopped in the yard between the two forces. I received some interesting telegrams, McKenna announced, his voice carrying the authority of the bench. Accusations of fraud, murder, and conspiracy. As it happens, I've been investigating similar claims across 3 territories. He turned to Thorne. Mr. Shepard, I believe you know why I'm here. For the first time, Thorne's confidence cracked. Judge McKenna, this is a simple contract dispute. Nothing about this is simple. McKenna cut him off. I have warrants for your arrest and the arrest of your associates. Federal warrants, Mr. Shepard, the kind that supersede territorial authority. You're one man, Thorne said, his hand moving to his gun. One man with the full authority of the United States government, McKenna replied calmly. Kill me, and you'll have the entire cavalry here within a week. Is that really the road you want to travel? The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. 50 armed men against a handful of defenders and 1 aging judge. The smart money would have been on Thorne. But something shifted in the air. Maybe it was the judge's unwavering confidence, or the steadfast defense of the ranch, or simply the weight of accumulated crimes finally becoming too heavy to bear. One of Thorne's men lowered his rifle. Then another. Any man who rides away now will be considered a witness, not an accomplice, McKenna announced. But those who stay to fight federal authority will hang beside their leader. The exodus began slowly, then gained momentum. Men who'd followed Thorne for money and power saw those things evaporating like morning dew. Within minutes, his 50 riders had dwindled to a dozen diehard supporters. Thorne's face had gone the color of old ash. This isn't over. I have friends. Influence. Had, McKenna corrected. Your friend Judge Blackwood is under arrest. Senator Webb is facing investigation. Your whole network is crumbling, Mr. Shepard. It's over. You planned this, Margaret said wonderingly, looking at Pierce. The telegrams, the judge. I've been working this case for months, Pierce admitted. But we needed evidence, witnesses willing to testify. You gave us that, Mrs. Whitmore. All of you did. Thorne made his last desperate play, spurring his horse toward the cabin, gun drawn. Perhaps he thought to take hostages, or maybe it was simply the rage of a man watching his empire dissolve. He never made it. 3 shots rang out almost simultaneously, from Boone, from Rosalie, and from Marshal Pierce. Thorne tumbled from his saddle, his grand ambitions ending in the dust of a small Wyoming ranch. His remaining men threw down their weapons, hands raised in surrender. The siege was over before it truly began, ended not by violence, but by the slow, inexorable grinding of justice finally finding its mark. As the sun set on that momentous day, painting the prairie in shades of purple and gold, the survivors gathered in Boone's bullet-scarred cabin. The twins sat together, no longer identical strangers, but sisters forged stronger by shared trials. Margaret wept silently, whether from relief or grief. None could say. "What happens now?" Sati asked quietly. Judge McKenna, accepting a cup of coffee with grateful hands, considered the question. "The legal matters will take time to sort out. The fraudulent contracts are void. Obviously, the murder investigations will proceed. As for you ladies," he looked at the twins with grandfatherly concern. "You're free to go wherever you wish, be whoever you choose." "The question is," Rosalie said, looking at Boone with an unreadable expression, "where is that exactly?" It was a question that hung in the air like smoke from the lamp, requiring an answer that none of them were quite ready to give. The immediate danger had passed, but the future stretched before them, uncertain and full of possibility. The letters that had brought them together lay scattered on the table, lies that had revealed truth, deception that had uncovered courage, and false promises that had led to something real, if undefined. Outside, the prairie wind sang its eternal song, indifferent to human schemes and dreams alike. But inside the small cabin, 3 hearts beat with the rhythm of survival, of justice served, and of choices yet to be made. The dust had barely settled from Thorne's downfall when Judge McKenna delivered news that would shake their newfound stability. He set down his coffee cup with deliberate care, his weathered face grave in the lamplight. "There's something else you need to know," he said, pulling a sealed document from his coat. "This arrived by special courier just before I rode out here. It concerns mineral rights claims filed on this land." Boone's jaw tightened. "My deed is clear. I filed everything proper with the land office." "Your surface rights are clear," McKenna agreed. "But mineral rights are a different matter. It seems Thorne filed a separate claim 3 months ago, before any of this marriage scheme began." "That's impossible," Pierce interjected. "He'd need grounds." "He claimed prior discovery. Said he found copper ore markers while trailing stolen cattle across this land last spring." The judge spread out the paperwork. "It's all properly witnessed and filed." Rosalie slammed her hand on the table. "More forgeries, more lies." "Perhaps, but proving that will take time. And in the meantime," McKenna hesitated, then continued, "there's a Denver mining consortium ready to back his claim. They could tie this up in courts for years. Unless Boone knew there had to be more. Unless you can prove active mining operations within 30 days. That's the territorial law. Mineral claims must be worked or they're forfeit." 30 days, Sati shook her head. "That's impossible. We don't have equipment, miners, anything." Margaret, who'd been silent since Thorne's death, suddenly spoke up. "The copper isn't the real treasure." All eyes turned to her. "Franklin discovered something else when he was investigating Thorne's schemes. In his papers, the ones I didn't bring, the ones still hidden in Denver." "Aunt Margaret," Rosalie's voice carried warning. "What are you saying?" "Silver," the older woman whispered. "A vein of silver that would make the Comstock look poor. Franklin found the old Spanish survey maps. That's the real reason Thorne wanted this land." Pierce leaned forward intently. "Where are these papers?" "Hidden in the basement wall of the shop, behind the loose brick where Franklin kept his emergency cash." Margaret's hands trembled. "But Thorne's men control Denver now. Getting those documents would be suicide," Pierce finished. "Not necessarily," Judge McKenna mused. "I have federal authority. I could commandeer those papers as evidence. But that would take time." Boone said, "Time we don't have." "Then we make time," Rosalie declared, steel in her voice. "We fight for every day, every hour if we have to." The meeting broke up with plans half-formed and hope wearing thin. As the others bedded down for the night, Pierce and the judge in the barn, Margaret, in the small lean-to Boone, found himself alone with the twins on the cabin's porch. The night sky sprawled above them, stars like scattered silver coins. "This isn't over," Sati said softly. "Even with Thorn gone, his partners won't give up."
Let them come,
Boone replied, though exhaustion weighted his words. "I've held this land for 5 years. I won't give it up now." Rosalie turned to study him in the moonlight. Why? Why fight so hard for a piece of dirt and rocks? Boone was quiet for a long moment. "My father died trying to build something out here. Comanches took him when I was 15. My mother followed him within the year. Broken heart. The doc said, 'This land.' He gestured at the dark prairie. It's all I have left of that dream. The only thing I've ever built that's truly mine." "We understand," Sati said, and her hand found his in the darkness. "We've lost our father too, our home, everything we thought we knew about ourselves." "You still have each other," Boone pointed out. "Yes," Rosalie agreed, moving closer to her sister. "But what good is that if we have nowhere to belong?" The question hung between them, charged with possibility. Boone felt the weight of it. The unspoken invitation. These women had come to him through deception, but their courage in facing danger had been real. Their grief was real. And, if he was honest with himself, his growing feelings for both of them were real too. "You could stay," he said quietly. "Both of you. Heaven knows the ranch needs work, and with possible mining operations in—" "As what?" Rosalie asked, though her tone had softened. "Your housekeepers, your mining partners." "As whatever you choose to be." Boone replied, "This land is big enough for 3 dreams instead of 1. Before either sister could respond, the sound of approaching horses shattered the night's peace. Multiple riders, coming fast from the south. "Inside," Boone ordered, grabbing his rifle. But the lead rider's voice rang out familiar in the darkness.
Delaney Marshall Pierce, it's Sam Washington, I'm bringing help.
They lowered their weapons as a dozen riders thundered into the yard. Sam, the old buffalo hunter, dismounted with surprising agility for his years. Behind him came faces Boone recognized, homesteaders from across the valley, men and women who'd stayed neutral in his conflict with Thorn. "Heard what happened," Sam said simply. "Heard what that snake Thorn was planning. Figure it's time decent folks stood together." A woman rider pushed forward, Catherine Baxter from the neighboring ranch. "My husband lost our first claim to Thorn's schemes. We won't see it happen again." She looked at the twins with curiosity, but no judgment. "You ladies need anything. You ask. Women got to stick together out here." More offers came. Tools for mining, spare horses, provisions, the isolated frontier community, so often divided by distance and distrust, was pulling together in the face of shared threat. "This is all well and good," Judge McKenna said, emerging from the barn. "But warm feelings won't establish a mining claim. You need actual operations. Then we'll build them." A new voice said. A young man stepped forward. Thomas Hartley, recently arrived from Pennsylvania. "I'm an engineer. Work the coal mines back east. If there's ore here, I can help you get it out." "Can't pay you," Boone said bluntly. "Not until we're producing." "Then we'll work on shares," Catherine Baxter declared. "All of us. A cooperative mining venture. Thorn's partners want to tie this up in court. Let them fight the whole valley." The impromptu meeting continued past midnight, plans taking shape with the kind of determination that had carved civilization from wilderness. But Boone noticed Margaret growing increasingly agitated, finally slipping away from the group. He found her by the corral, staring at the dark horizon. "Mrs. Whitmore." "They'll come for me," she said quietly. "Thorn's partners. I know too much, and I've already betrayed them once." "We'll protect you," she laughed bitterly. "You can't protect everyone, Mr. Delaney, and my sins. They run deeper than you know." "Meaning?" Margaret turned to face him, tears glittering in the starlight. The letters weren't the first deception. 10 years ago, I helped Thorne destroy another family, the Hartleys in Pennsylvania. That young man who just offered to help you, his father killed himself after Thorne stole his mines. The revelation hit Boone like cold water. Does he know? No, and if he finds out... Margaret shuddered. You see, the poison spreads. Every kindness offered here tonight might hide another victim of our schemes. Then we end it, Rosalie said, stepping from the shadows with Satie. They'd obviously heard everything. We bring all the secrets into the light. Let people choose their own justice. You don't understand, Margaret protested. The shame. We understand perfectly. Satie interrupted gently. You think we don't feel shame? Our father gambled us away like poker chips, but hiding from truth won't heal anything. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. The makeshift mining cooperative began surveying for the best drilling sites. Thomas Hartley proved as good as his word, identifying promising geological formations with practiced ease. There's definitely something here, he told Boone, studying rock samples. The question is whether we can reach it in 30 days. While the men worked on mining preparations, the twins surprised everyone by taking charge of logistics. Satie organized food and medical supplies with quiet efficiency, while Rosalie coordinated guards and communications. You're not what I expected from mail-order brides, Catherine Baxter commented, watching them work. We're not mail-order brides, Rosalie corrected firmly. We never were. We're just women trying to survive in a world that treats us as property. I'm in to that, Catherine replied with feeling. As the sun climbed high, a lone rider appeared on the horizon. Everyone tensed, but it was just a boy from town with a telegram for Judge McKenna. The judge read it, his expression darkening. What is it? Pierce asked. The consortium in Denver. They're moving faster than expected. They've got a federal injunction to halt any mining operations until ownership is settled. They can't do that, Boone protested. They can and they have. It'll be overturned. But that takes time. McKenna crumpled the telegram. Unless what? The judge looked at the twins speculatively. There is one way to establish immediate claim. Traditional claim. If Mr. Delaney were married, legally married, to a woman with documented interest in the mineral rights. You're suggesting I marry for the mine? Boone asked incredulously. I'm suggesting, McKenna said carefully, that sometimes the law provides interesting solutions to complex problems. Rosalie laughed harshly. So we're back to being bargaining chips. No, the judge corrected. You'd be equal partners. The law's changing, slowly but surely. A married woman's property rights are being recognized more each year. Do this right, and you'd have more power than Thorne ever imagined giving you. The work continued around them as they absorbed this possibility. Drills bit into earth, revealing traces of copper and hints of something more. The cooperative spirit held, people united by purpose and shared risk. As afternoon wore on, Margaret pulled Boone aside. There's something else about the twins' parentage. What Morrison said wasn't entirely a lie. Boone's stomach tightened. Explain. Their mother had a first love before Franklin, a Spanish nobleman's son, visiting from California. When he left, she discovered she was with child. Franklin married her anyway. Gave the girls his name, but if their real father's family ever learned of their existence, they'd have claim to Spanish land grants in California. Boone finished. Worth a fortune. Worth killing for, Margaret confirmed. I've protected this secret for 20 years, but secrets have a way of surfacing, especially when lawyers start digging. The implications staggered him. Every solution seemed to reveal new complications, every truth to birth new lies. Yet looking at the twins, Satie carefully tending a man's scraped hand, Rosalie standing guard with rifle ready, Boone felt a curious certainty. Then we'd better make sure we're ready for whatever surfaces, he said, as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the work site in shades of gold and amber. Thomas Hartley let out a shout. "Here, I found it." Everyone gathered around the test hole where Thomas held up a rock that glinted with unmistakable silver ore. "It's not just traces," he said excitedly. "This is a major vein. With proper equipment, this could be one of the richest strikes in the territory." Cheers erupted, but Boone noticed the twins standing apart, hands clasped together as they watched their future taking shape in ways none of them could have imagined. "Quite a turn from where we started," Rosalie murmured. "The question is," Sati added, looking at Boone with those sage green eyes, "where do we go from here?" It was, Boone reflected, the only question that really mattered. They'd survived Thorne's violent schemes, uncovered treasures both mineral and human, and forged bonds in the crucible of shared danger. But the future remained unwritten, full of promise and peril in equal measure. The work continued as shadows lengthened, everyone aware that they were racing against time, against law, against the grinding wheels of power and money that sought to crush individual dreams. But for now, in this moment, they were together, and in the wild heart of Wyoming territory. Sometimes that was enough to build a future on. Sometimes it was everything. The crack of rifle fire shattered the pre-dawn stillness. Rosalie jerked awake, instinctively reaching for the Winchester she'd kept by her bedside since arriving at the ranch. Beside her, Sati stirred with a soft gasp. "Stay down," Rosalie hissed, moving toward the window with practiced stealth. More shots rang out, but they seemed distant, coming from the direction of the mining site. Through the gray morning light, she could see muzzle flashes on the ridge overlooking their camp. "Thorne's partners," she breathed. "They've sent hired guns." Boone burst through the door, already dressed and armed. "They're hitting the mine site, trying to destroy our equipment before we can establish the claim." The three of them moved swiftly, Sati pausing only to grab the medical supplies she'd prepared. As they raced toward the mining camp, they could hear the battle intensifying, the bark of rifles mixing with shouts and the panicked whinnying of horses. They found chaos. The night guards had taken cover behind overturned wagons and equipment, returning fire at attackers hidden in the rocks above. Sam Washington was bleeding from a shoulder wound but still firing his buffalo rifle with deadly accuracy. "How many?" Boone demanded, sliding into cover beside Marshal Pierce. 20, maybe more," Pierce replied. "Reloading. Professional killers from the look of it. They came in quiet, but young Hartley spotted them and raised the alarm." Thomas Hartley was crouched behind the drilling equipment, his engineer's hands steady on a borrowed rifle. Despite Margaret's revelation about his family's connection to Thorne, he'd thrown himself into the fight without hesitation. "They're trying to flank us," Rosalie observed, noting movement along the eastern ridge. Without waiting for permission, she took position and began firing, her shots deliberate and effective. Sati moved among the defenders, staying low as bullets whined overhead. She reached Sam Washington and immediately began treating his wound, her hands sure despite the danger. "Just a scratch," the old hunter growled, but his face was pale. "A scratch that needs tending," Sati replied firmly, packing the wound with clean cloth. "Hold still." The battle raged as the sun climbed higher, painting the battlefield in stark relief. The attackers had superior position, but the defenders had desperation and righteous fury on their side. Every person there had suffered under Thorne's schemes or those like him. They weren't fighting just for Boone's land anymore. They were fighting for the principle that ordinary people could stand against the powerful and win. "Look there," Catherine Baxter called out, pointing to a dust cloud approaching from the south. More riders. Boone's heart sank. They couldn't withstand reinforcements. But as the riders crested the hill, he saw Judge McKenna's silver hair catching the morning light. Behind him rode a full company of cavalry, guidons snapping in the breeze. Federal troops, Pierce said with satisfaction. The judge must have wired Fort Laramie. The tide turned quickly. Faced with uniformed soldiers and the promise of federal prosecution, the hired guns began melting away into the hills. A few tried to make a stand but were quickly overwhelmed. As the dust settled, Captain Marcus Webb of the 7th Cavalry dismounted and saluted Judge McKenna. "Sir, we've rounded up 8 of them. The rest scattered like quail." "Excellent work. Captain—" McKenna turned to the defenders. "Is anyone seriously hurt?" "Sam's wounded," Sati reported. "And Mr. Hendricks took a bullet in the leg. Both will recover with proper care." "More importantly," Rosalie added coldly, "they failed to destroy the mine. We can still make the deadline." But Margaret, who had been helping with the wounded, suddenly cried out, "Oh God, no! Please, no!" Everyone turned to see her kneeling beside a fallen attacker. The man was dying, blood frothing from his lips, but his eyes were fixed on Margaret with terrible recognition. "Aunt Margaret," he whispered. "Daniel," she sobbed. "Oh, Daniel, what have you done?" "Your nephew?" Boone asked quietly. Margaret nodded through her tears. "My sister's boy. I didn't know he'd fallen in with these men." She cradled the young man's head. "Why, Daniel, why throw your life away for their money?" Had debts. They said it would be easy." His eyes found the twins. "Cousins, I'm sorry." Rosalie knelt beside her dying cousin, her earlier hardness melting into grief. "We forgive you," she said simply. Sati joined them, taking Daniel's hand. "Family forgives," she whispered. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Tell her I tried to be good." He died as the sun reached its zenith, one more casualty of the greed and corruption that infected the frontier like a disease. They buried him on a hill overlooking the valley, Margaret weeping for all the young men led astray by false promises of easy wealth. Judge McKenna used the moment to address the assembled defenders. "Let this be a lesson. Violence begets violence. Greed spawns only grief. But justice, true justice, that's worth fighting for." The work resumed with renewed urgency. They had less than 2 weeks to establish a producing mine, and the technical challenges were immense. But Thomas Hartley proved invaluable, directing the construction of proper supports and ventilation. "This vein runs deeper than we thought," he told Boone, showing him the latest samples. "With the right investment, this could employ 100 men. The cooperative will see to that," Catherine Baxter said firmly. "No single owner to be corrupted. Shared risk, shared reward." As evening approached, an unexpected visitor arrived, a distinguished older gentleman in expensive clothes, accompanied by 2 lawyers and a small escort of armed men. He introduced himself as Don Alejandro Vasquez from California. "I understand," he said in accented English, "that there are 2 young ladies here who might be my granddaughters." The twins froze. Margaret went pale as parchment. "I don't know what you mean," Rosalie said carefully. Don Alejandro smiled sadly. "My son Carlos visited Denver 23 years ago. He fell in love with a shopkeeper's daughter named Elizabeth. When I forbade the match, he obeyed and returned to California, but he never forgot her. On his deathbed last month, he confessed everything and begged me to find his children if they existed." "Our father was Franklin Quinn," Sati said, but her voice lacked conviction. "The man who raised you, yes, a good man, by all accounts." Don Alejandro pulled out a miniature portrait. "This was Carlos. Tell me you don't see the resemblance." They couldn't deny it. The man in the portrait had their eyes, their cheekbones, the same determined set to his jaw. "What do you want?" Rosalie asked bluntly. "To know you, to offer you your birthright." He gestured to his lawyers. "The Vasquez land grants in California, vineyards, cattle ranches, trading posts, worth millions." "And the price," Boone interjected, protective instinct flaring. "No price, no conditions. The old man's eyes glistened. I've lost my only son. I won't compound that tragedy by trying to control his daughters. The inheritance is theirs whether they come to California or stay here. The revelation sent shockwaves through the camp. The twins, who'd arrived as supposed penniless mail-order brides, were heiresses to a fortune. It changed everything and nothing. We need time, Sati said diplomatically. This is overwhelming. Of course. Don Alejandro bowed. I've taken rooms in town. When you're ready to talk, send word. He paused at his horse. Your mother, did she have happiness with Mr. Quinn? Yes, both twins answered. She was loved. The old man nodded and rode away, leaving behind a camp buzzing with speculation. That night, Boone found the twins sitting by the mine entrance, watching the stars. The silver vein glowed faintly in the lamplight behind them. Promise made manifest. Everything's changed, Sati said softly. Has it? Boone asked. You're still the same women who stood against Thorne's guns, who forgave your dying cousin, who chose courage over comfort. But now we have choices, Rosalie pointed out. Real choices. We could go to California, be wealthy heiresses, or stay here and what? Boone prompted. The sisters exchanged one of their wordless communications. Then Rosalie spoke, her voice strong and clear. Judge McKenna mentioned that marriage could secure the mining rights, protect everything we've all built here. I won't marry for convenience, Boone said firmly. Not after everything we've been through. What about for love? Sati asked quietly. The question hung in the night air. 3 people who'd been brought together by deception, who'd faced death and discovered truth, who'd built something none of them had expected. The thing is, Rosalie said slowly, we've been writing to each other. All of us. The letters might have been false, but our responses were real. Sati and I, we've talked about the future, about what we want. And Boone's heart hammered against his ribs. We want the same thing, Sati said simply. A home, a family, a place to belong, someone to belong with. Both of you. Both of us, they confirmed together. Boone understood what they were suggesting. It went against convention, against law, against everything proper society dictated. But out here, on the frontier, society's rules seemed less important than survival, than loyalty, than love. People would talk, he warned. Let them, Rosalie said fiercely. We've faced down killers and conspiracies. Gossip doesn't scare us. The law recognizes one marriage. Sati interrupted. But the heart recognizes what the heart recognizes. Marshal Pierce found them there as midnight approached. Judge McKenna wants to see all of you. Says it's urgent. They found the judge in Boone's cabin, papers spread before him. Captain Webb was there, along with Margaret and, surprisingly, Don Alejandro. I've been in communication with Washington, McKenna announced. The conspiracy goes deeper than we thought. The Denver Consortium has connections all the way to Congress. They're pushing through legislation that would invalidate small mining claims in favor of large corporations. When? Boone asked. The vote is in 2 weeks. If it passes, everything we've done here won't matter. They'll take it all anyway. Then we stop them. Rosalie declared. How? Pierce asked. We're talking about the United States Congress. With the truth, Margaret said suddenly. Everyone turned to her. I have more documents, not just about Thorne's schemes, but about all of them. Every bribe, every threat, every murdered homesteader. I've been keeping records for years, hoping someday to atone. That's evidence of massive corruption, McKenna breathed. With that, we could bring down their entire network. But it's in Denver, Margaret continued. Hidden in places only I know. I'd have to go myself to retrieve it. It's too dangerous, Sati protested. They'll be watching for you. Then I'll go with her, Don Alejandro said unexpectedly. An old man visiting Denver raises no suspicions, and my men can provide protection. Why would you help us? Rosalie asked suspiciously. The old man smiled. Because corruption destroyed my son's chance at love, I won't let it destroy his daughter's chance at happiness. Plans formed quickly. Margaret and Don Alejandro would leave for Denver at dawn. Pierce would telegraph his contacts in Washington. The mining work would continue, racing against both time and political machination. As the meeting broke up, Judge McKenna pulled Boone aside. About the marriage question, there might be a way. Sati marries you legally. Rosalie takes back her birth name, Vasquez, as a California heiress. She'd have certain freedoms, including the right to live where she chooses, with whom she chooses. You're suggesting... I'm suggesting nothing, McKenna said firmly. I'm simply observing that the law is complex, and sometimes complexity provides opportunities. What people choose to do with those opportunities is their own business. As dawn approached, they gathered to see off the Denver expedition. Margaret embraced her nieces, no longer the broken woman who'd arrived days ago, but someone who'd found purpose in redemption. Be careful, Sati urged. I've been a coward most of my life. Margaret replied, It's time I showed the courage you girls have taught me. Don Alejandro bowed to his granddaughters. Whatever you decide about California, know that you have family who loves you. As they rode away, Boone stood between the twins, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. The mine shaft gaped behind them, the camp stirred to life around them, and the future stretched ahead. Uncertain but no longer hopeless. So, he said quietly, what now? Sati slipped her hand into his. Now we dig, we fight, we build. Rosalie took his other hand. Together. And in that moment, standing on land scarred by violence but pregnant with promise, 3 hearts beat as one. It wasn't the life any of them had imagined when pen first touched paper all those months ago. It was something better, something real, something worth fighting for. The end would come, to the mining deadline, to the political battle, to their unconventional arrangement. But that was for tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after. For now, there was work to do, and they would do it together. The week following Margaret's departure for Denver passed in a blur of back-breaking work and mounting tension. The silver vein proved rich beyond their wildest dreams. But extracting it required every ounce of strength and ingenuity the small community could muster. Boone stood at the mine entrance, watching Thomas Hartley direct the placement of support beams. The young engineer had thrown himself into the work with an intensity that bordered on obsession, as if he could somehow excavate his family's buried pain along with the ore. We're making progress, Thomas reported, wiping sweat from his brow despite the morning chill. Another few days and we'll have a proper operation that no court could dismiss. If we have another few days, Rosalie said, approaching with a telegram in hand. Her face was grim. Pierce just received word from Washington. The vote on the mining legislation has been moved up. We have 3 days. Boone cursed under his breath. They know we're close. They're trying to cut us off at the knees. Then we work faster, Sati said, joining them with fresh water for the workers. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion, but her spirit remained unbroken. We've come too far to fail now. As if to underscore the urgency, a rider appeared on the horizon, spurring his horse hard. It was one of Don Alejandro's men, and his expression as he dismounted told them the news wasn't good. Señoritas, he addressed the twins, hat in hand. Your grandfather sends word. They reached Denver safely, but the city is crawling with hired guns. They're holed up in the Metropolitan Hotel, waiting for a chance to retrieve the documents. Is Aunt Margaret safe? Sati asked anxiously. Side for now, but Don Alejandro says to tell you, the enemy knows they're there. It's a race against time. That evening, as the workers shared a simple meal around the campfire, An unexpected voice rose in song. Sam Washington, his shoulder still bandaged but healing, began an old spiritual his mother had taught him, one by one. Others joined in, former slaves and former soldiers, immigrants and native-born, all united in harmony. Boone felt something shift in his chest as he watched the twins add their voices to the chorus. This ragtag group had become more than a mining cooperative. They'd become a community, a family forged in adversity. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Judge McKenna said, settling beside him with a groan. The older man had been working alongside everyone else, proving that federal authority didn't exempt him from honest labor. "Never thought I'd see anything like it," Boone admitted. "The West has a way of breaking down barriers," McKenna mused. "Out here, what matters isn't where you came from, but what you're willing to build." He paused meaningfully. "Speaking of building, have you given thought to the future assuming we survive the next 3 days?" Boone's gaze found the twins across the fire. "I've thought of little else. And I think the heart wants what the heart wants. Consequences be damned." McKenna chuckled, spoken like a true frontiersman. "Just remember, the law may be rigid, but life is fluid. There are ways to honor both." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Everyone tensed, hands moving to weapons. But the riders carried torches and came openly. "Delaney," the lead rider called. "I'm James Morrison from the Copper Creek Mine. We heard what you're trying to do here. Heard how you're standing up to the consortiums." "What's it to you?" Pierce asked suspiciously. Morrison dismounted, revealing a weathered face marked by years of hard labor. "They're coming for us next. Already got lawyers sniffing around, talking about invalid claims and eminent domain. We figured maybe it's time small operators stood together." Behind him, more miners dismounted. They'd brought equipment, drilling tools, explosives, everything needed to accelerate the excavation. "We can't pay," Boone began. "Not asking for pay," Morrison interrupted. "We're asking for hope. You show it can be done, that regular folks can fight back and win, and that's payment enough." The reinforcements couldn't have come at a better time. With experienced miners joining the effort, the work accelerated dramatically. The twins coordinated the expanded operation with surprising efficiency. Sati managing supplies while Rosalie organized the work shifts. On the second night, as Boone caught a few hours of rest, he was awakened by a commotion outside. Catherine Baxter had arrived with a dozen women from town, all armed and determined. "Figured you could use more hands," she announced. "And before any of you men say women can't mine, remember who's been mining for vegetables in hard ground, washing gold from streams, and generally keeping this territory alive while you've been off playing cowboy." The women integrated seamlessly into the operation, some working the sluices, others standing guard. The sight of armed women defending the mine seemed to unnerve the consortium's spies more than any show of masculine force. As dawn broke on the final day, two things happened simultaneously. First, Thomas Hartley emerged from the mine shaft with a shout of triumph, carrying a chunk of silver or the size of a man's head. They'd broken through to the main vein, revealing wealth beyond calculation. Second, a lone rider approached under a white flag. As he drew closer, Boone recognized him as one of Thorne's former lieutenants, a gunman named Wade Harper. "Come to gloat?" Rosalie asked, rifle trained on him. "Come to warn you," Harper said, surprising them. "The consortium's given up on legal means. They've sent a small army, 50 men, maybe more. They plan to wipe you out and claim everyone died in a mine collapse." "Why tell us?" Boone demanded. Harper shrugged. "Thorne was a bastard, but he had a code. These Eastern money men," he spat, "they'd sell their own mothers for a profit. Besides," he looked at the twins, "you ladies showed mercy to my brother when he was captured. Figure I owe you." "When?" Pierce asked urgently. "Tonight, after dark. They want it finished before the vote." As Harper rode away, The camp erupted in controlled chaos. Fortifications were strengthened, weapons distributed, plans made, but everyone knew they were outnumbered more than 2 to 1. We should evacuate the women and wounded, Captain Webb suggested. Like hell, Catherine Baxter responded. This is our fight too. She's right, Rosalie added, checking her ammunition. We stand together or fall together. Boone gathered his closest allies for a war council. The situation was desperate, but not hopeless. The mine's entrance created a natural choke point, and they had the high ground. If we can hold until dawn, Judge McKenna said, I can legally deputize everyone here, make this official law enforcement action. That's a long night ahead, Pierce observed. Then we'd better make it count, Boone replied. As afternoon shadows lengthened, a miracle arrived in the form of Don Alejandro and Margaret, accompanied by 20 vaqueros from the Vasquez ranches. Grandfather, Sati exclaimed, embracing the old man. We couldn't sit in Denver while family was in danger, Don Alejandro explained. Besides, we have what we came for. Margaret, dust-covered but triumphant, produced a leather satchel. Everything's here. Names, dates, amounts. Enough to hang half of Congress if justice truly exists. Did you have trouble? Rosalie asked. Some, Margaret admitted with a wan smile. But your grandfather's men are quite persuasive. Judge McKenna immediately began reviewing the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. This is extraordinary. We need to get this to Washington immediately. First, we survived the night, Boone reminded him. As the sun touched the western mountains, painting the valley in shades of blood and gold. Defenders took their positions. The miners had rigged explosives at strategic points, ready to create avalanches if needed. Every able-bodied person had a weapon and a place in the defensive line. Boone found himself between the twins as darkness fell. They stood quietly, hands occasionally touching, drawing strength from proximity. Whatever happens, he said quietly, I want you to know. We know, Sati interrupted gently. We've always known. Since the first letter, Rosalie added. Even through the lies, we could feel the truth of who you are. And we love you for it, they said in unison. The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses, many horses, their hoofbeats a thunder that seemed to shake the very ground. The consortium's army had arrived. They came in waves, professional killers mixed with desperate men lured by promises of easy wealth. The defenders met them with devastating fire from protected positions, but the sheer numbers were overwhelming.
First barricade's falling back,
someone shouted. Boone fired steadily, picking targets with careful precision. Beside him, the twins worked in perfect coordination, Sati loading while Rosalie fired, then switching seamlessly. The battle raged for hours, lit by muzzle flashes and burning wagons. The defenders gave ground slowly, making the attackers pay for every yard. But, inevitably, they were pushed back to the mine entrance itself.
Light the charges,
Morrison yelled. Explosions rocked the night, bringing down tons of rock on the advancing enemy. The tactical advantage shifted momentarily, but everyone knew it was temporary. Then, just as hope began to fade, a new sound cut through the chaos, a bugle playing the charge. Over the ridge came 2 companies of cavalry, guidons flying and sabers drawn. The army, Captain Webb exclaimed. But how? Judge McKenna smiled grimly. I took the liberty of telegraphing Fort Laramie yesterday, mentioned there might be an insurrection against federal authority. The arrival of federal troops turned the tide decisively. Faced with the United States Army, the consortium's hired guns scattered like leaves before a storm. Within an hour, the attack was over, dozens of prisoners taken. As dawn broke over the battlefield, revealing the cost of victory, Boone stood with the twins surveying their domain. The mine entrance remained intact, the silver vein protected, their community bloodied but unbroken. We did it, Sati breathed, leaning against him in exhaustion. We survived. Rosalie corrected. The real fight's just beginning. She was right. The documents Margaret had retrieved still needed to reach Washington. The legal battles would continue for months, maybe years, but standing there in the morning light, surrounded by friends who'd become family, Boone felt a bone-deep certainty that they would prevail. Mr. Delaney. Judge McKenna approached, looking haggard but satisfied. I'll be leaving for Washington today with the evidence, but before I go, there's the matter of securing your claim permanently. Boone looked at the twins, seeing his own thoughts reflected in their eyes. We're ready. Good, because I've taken the liberty of bringing a minister from town. Thought you might want to make certain arrangements official. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the silver mine, preparations began for a different kind of ceremony. Catherine Baxter and the women from town fashioned a wedding arch from mine timber and wildflowers. The minister, a young man named Paul Fletcher, seemed unsurprised by the unusual circumstances. I've married folks in stranger situations, he said with a smile. What matters is the commitment, not the convention. Sati wore her mother's wedding dress, miraculously preserved in her luggage. Rosalie stood as witness, wearing an identical dress they'd fashioned from spare fabric, a visual statement that this was no ordinary union. As Boone and Sati exchanged vows before the assembled community, everyone understood what was really happening. This was more than a legal convenience to secure mining rights. It was a declaration of intent, a promise that extended beyond what any law could recognize. Do you, Sati Quinn, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do, she said clearly, eyes shining. And do you, Boone Delaney, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, he replied, his voice carrying across the morning air. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. As they kissed, the crowd erupted in cheers. But the ceremony wasn't over. In a move that surprised no one who'd been paying attention, Rosalie stepped forward. In my grandfather's tradition, she announced, I wish to make a pledge of my own, not recognized by your law, perhaps, but binding in the eyes of God and this community. She took Boone's hand and Sati's, joining them together with hers on top. I pledge my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor to this family. Where you go, I go. What you build, I build. Your joys and sorrows are mine, from this day forward. Minister Fletcher, bless him, didn't bat an eye. The Lord works in mysterious ways, he said simply, and love takes many forms. May you all find happiness in the path you've chosen. As the impromptu celebration continued around them, Judge McKenna pulled Boone aside one last time. The Vasquez inheritance complicates things legally, he said, but it also provides opportunities. With Rosalie maintaining her grandfather's name and fortune, she'll have independence few women achieve. How she chooses to use that independence. He shrugged eloquently. We understand. Boone assured him. I thought you might. The West is changing. Mr. Delaney. Maybe not as fast as we'd like, but changing nonetheless. Families like yours, built on choice rather than convention. They're the future. As McKenna prepared to leave for Washington with his precious cargo of evidence, Margaret approached the twins one last time. I don't ask for forgiveness, she said quietly, but I hope someday you might understand. I thought I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself, Rosalie said, but without heat. We all make choices. Aunt Margaret, yours led us here. To pain and loss. To truth and love, Sati corrected gently. The pain would have come anyway. At least now we face it honestly. Margaret nodded, tears flowing freely. Your parents would be proud, both sets of them. As the day wore on, the camp slowly transformed back from battlefield to mining operation. There was work to be done, ore to extract, dreams to build, but something fundamental had changed. This was no longer just a business venture or even a community. It was a statement of defiance against those who would reduce human lives to entries in a ledger. That evening, as the three of them stood watching the sunset from the cabin porch, Rosalie voiced what they were all thinking. It won't be easy. People will talk. Laws will challenge us. Society will judge. Let them, Boone said firmly. We've faced down guns and greed. Gossip seems pretty tame in comparison. Besides, Sati added with a small smile, we have something they don't. What's that? Rosalie asked. Each other, and a mind full of silver to fund our defiance. They laughed, the sound carrying across the valley like a promise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, legal battles, social censure, the ongoing fight to build something lasting in a world that preferred conformity to courage. But tonight, they were together. 3 hearts beating as one. 3 souls united by choice rather than chance. 3 people who'd found in each other what no single pairing could provide, completion. The stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky. Silver points of light that seemed to echo the treasure hidden in the earth below. And in a small cabin on the Wyoming frontier, a new kind of family began writing the next chapter of their unlikely story. The autumn wind carried the scent of sage and approaching winter as 3 figures worked side by side in the expanded garden behind the cabin. 6 months had passed since the wedding, since the battle for the mine, since 3 lives had intertwined in defiance of convention. The ranch had transformed from a bachelor's modest holding into something altogether different, a home that breathed with shared purpose and carefully tended love. The carrots are ready, Sati announced, pulling up a handful of orange roots. Her hands, once soft from city living, now bore the calluses of honest work. We'll have enough to last through winter. Rosalie, kneeling between rows of turnips, brushed dirt from her face with the back of her hand. Good, the root cellar's nearly full. We won't go hungry, whatever else happens. Boone paused in his work of reinforcing the garden fence, watching the 2 women with a warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. The sight of them working together, comfortable in their shared rhythm, still sometimes took his breath away. Letter came from town, he said, pulling an envelope from his shirt pocket. From Judge McKenna. Both women looked up sharply. News from Washington had been sparse and often troubling. The corruption investigation was proceeding, but powerful forces were fighting back. Sati wiped her hands on her apron as they gathered around to read. McKenna's precise handwriting filled several pages. The evidence misses, Whitmore provided, has created a sensation. 3 congressmen have resigned, and Senator Webb is under indictment. However, the mining consortium has hired the best lawyers money can buy. They're challenging every claim, including yours. I fear this will drag on for years unless something dramatic shifts the balance. Years, Rosalie said bitterly. While they tie us up in court, they'll find other ways to steal what we've built. There's more. Boone continued reading. He says Don Alejandro has offered to fund our legal defense entirely, and, he paused, surprised. Thomas Hartley has passed his engineering certification. He wants to return and help manage the mine professionally. He left so suddenly after the fight, Sati mused. I wondered if learning about his father made him more determined to see justice done. Rosalie finished. Good. We'll need all the help we can get. The sound of approaching horses interrupted their discussion. Marshal Pierce appeared, accompanied by a stranger, a well-dressed woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and an air of quiet authority. Folks, Pierce said as they dismounted, this is Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell from Chicago. She's a journalist with the Tribune, and she's very interested in your story. Eleanor Hartwell extended her hand, her grip firm and confident. I've been following the corruption trials. When I learned about your unique situation here, I knew I had to come see for myself. Rosalie's posture stiffened. If you've come to write some sensational piece about our private arrangements, on the contrary, Eleanor interrupted smoothly. I've come to write about courage, about ordinary people standing against extraordinary greed. The fact that you've done so while creating an unconventional family structure. That's not scandal. Miss Vasquez, that's evolution. They invited her inside, where coffee and careful conversation gradually eased the tension. Eleanor proved to be sharp, insightful, and surprisingly sympathetic. I was married once, she confided. My husband died in the war. Society expected me to remarry or fade quietly into genteel poverty. Instead, I became a journalist. I know what it's like to live outside conventional boundaries. It's not the same, Sati said gently but firmly. You chose independence. We chose complexity. Did you? Eleanor leaned forward. Or did you simply refuse to let others' limited imaginations define your capacity for love? As the afternoon wore on, she interviewed each of them separately. Then, together, her questions were probing but respectful, seeking understanding rather than sensation. What I find remarkable, she said finally, is how naturally you've organized your household. There's no sense of competition or jealousy. How do you manage it? The three exchanged glances, communicating in that wordless way they'd developed. We talked, Boone said simply, from the beginning, about everything, expectations, fears, boundaries. And we keep talking. Sati added, every day. Honesty is the only foundation strong enough to build on. We each have our strengths, Rosalie contributed. Sati manages the household and medical needs. I handle the business side of the mine and ranch. Boone oversees the physical operations. We're partners in every sense. Eleanor made notes, her expression thoughtful. And the legal complications are significant, Boone admitted. Sati and I are legally married. Rosalie maintains her own legal identity as a Vasquez heir. On paper, she's a business partner who happens to live with us. On paper, Eleanor repeated with a knowing smile. But life is lived off paper, isn't it? That evening, they showed Eleanor the mine. The operation had grown significantly. Employing 30 men from the surrounding area, the cooperative model had proven successful with profits shared according to contribution rather than hoarded by distant owners. This is what threatens them, Eleanor observed, watching the men work. Not just the silver you're pulling out, but the idea that there's another way to do business, one based on community rather than exploitation. Thomas Hartley had arrived that very day. His engineer's certificate proudly displayed. He'd matured in his months away. The angry young man replaced by someone tempered by purpose. Miss Hartwell, he said after being introduced, I hope you'll write the truth about what Mr. Delaney and the ladies have built here. The consortium killed my father, ruined my family, but watching these folks fight back, it's shown me that victory is possible. Victory isn't won yet, Pierce reminded them. I've gotten word that the consortium is planning something. My sources aren't sure what, but they're bringing in new players, Eastern money, maybe even foreign investors. The warning cast a shadow over the evening meal, but it couldn't entirely dampen the warmth of their gathering. Eleanor fit seamlessly into their extended family of miners, ranchers, and reformed outlaws. She regaled them with stories from Chicago, while Sam Washington countered with tales from his buffalo hunting days. Later, as the others bedded down in the bunkhouse, Eleanor requested a final private conversation with the three partners. I need to be honest, she said. My editor sent me here expecting a scandalous story about frontier immorality. What I've found is something far more interesting and dangerous to certain interests. Dangerous how? Rosalie asked. You're proving that alternative family structures can not only work, but thrive. That business can be conducted ethically. That women can be full partners rather than property. Every success you have undermines 100 justifications for the current order. So you won't write about us? Sati asked, disappointment clear in her voice. Oh, I'll write about you. Eleanor smiled. But not the story my editor expects. I'll write about the mine, the cooperative, the fight against corruption. Your personal arrangements will be mentioned only as evidence of the fresh thinking that makes your success possible." "That's more discretion than we expected," Boone said gratefully. "It's not discretion, it's strategy." Eleanor's eyes gleamed. "Change doesn't come from shocking people. It comes from showing them a better way and letting them draw their own conclusions." The next morning brought disturbing news. A writer from town reported that strangers had been asking questions, well-dressed men with Eastern accents, accompanied by hired guns. "They're not trying to hide." The writer, young Billy Chen from the general store, reported. "It's like they want folks to know they're here." "Intimidation," Pierce concluded. "They're trying to scare off your workers, make people afraid to associate with you." "Then we'd better give people a reason to stay brave," Rosalie declared. They organized a community meeting for that evening, inviting everyone who'd stood with them during the fight. The turnout was impressive. Miners, ranchers, townspeople, even some who'd previously remained neutral. Boone stood before the assembled crowd, flanked by both women. "We all know why we're here. The consortium is making another move. They want us afraid, divided, ready to surrender." "They killed my brother in Colorado," one miner called out, claimed it was an accident, but we all knew better. "Burned out my first homestead," another added. "Said I hadn't filed the papers right." Story after story emerged, a pattern of intimidation, violence, and legal manipulation that had destroyed countless lives across the territory. "So, what do we do?" Catherine Baxter asked. "We can't all stand guard forever." "We don't have to," Thomas Hartley said, stepping forward. "I've been corresponding with engineering schools back east. There's interest in studying our mining methods, our cooperative structure. If we invite academic observers, newspaper correspondents, even foreign investors who oppose the consortium." "We make ourselves too visible to attack," Eleanor finished approvingly. "Brilliant." "It's more than that," Sati added quietly. "We show the world there's another way, not just in business, but in how people can choose to live." The meeting energized the community. Plans were made to reach out to universities, newspapers, even sympathetic politicians. The three partners found themselves at the center of a movement they'd never intended to start. As the crowd dispersed, an elderly Mexican woman approached them. Maria Santos had been one of the first to stand with them, and her opinion carried weight in the community. "You three," she said, studying them with knowing eyes. "People whisper about how you live. Some disapprove." Rosalie's chin lifted defiantly, but Maria continued before she could speak. "Let them whisper. I've lived long enough to know that love takes many forms. My grandmother was Navajo. In her tribe, sometimes a woman would take 2 husbands, brothers who would share the work in the family. It wasn't scandal. It was practical." "We're not," Sati began, but Maria waved her hand. "You're not anything that fits in their small boxes. Good. Boxes are for the dead. You three, you're alive, you love, you build, that's what matters." She patted Boone's arm and walked away, leaving them moved by her unexpected blessing. That night, as they prepared for bed in their expanded cabin, 2 rooms now, with space for privacy and togetherness as needed, Eleanor made her final notes. "I leave tomorrow," she announced. "But I want you to know, what you've built here is remarkable. Not just the mine or the resistance to corruption, but this." She gestured to encompass their domestic arrangement. "You've created something based on trust, respect, and genuine affection. It shouldn't work, but it does. Because we don't ask it to be anything other than what it is." Boone said simply. "No jealousy," Eleanor probed one last time. "Why would there be?" Sati asked. "We each receive what we need. We each give what we can. The love isn't divided. It's multiplied." "And if children come?" Eleanor asked delicately. The 3 exchanged those speaking looks again. Then they'll have 3 parents who wanted them, Rosalie said firmly. 3 examples of how to live with courage and authenticity. Eleanor closed her notebook with a satisfied snap. The consortium has no idea what they're truly fighting. They think it's about silver and land rights, but it's about the future itself, whether it belongs to those who would control and constrain, or those who would create and include. As she retired to the guest room, the 3 partners sat together before the fire, hands linked in a chain of connection that had become as natural as breathing. "She's right, you know," Sati said softly. "What we're doing here, it's bigger than us." "It doesn't feel big," Boone replied. "It feels like home. That's what makes it powerful." Rosalie added, "We're not trying to change the world. We're just living our lives honestly. If that threatens their system, maybe their system needs threatening." Outside, coyotes called to each other across the darkness. Their wild songs a reminder that the frontier still existed, not just in geography, but in the spaces between convention and possibility, between what was and what could be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The consortium's agents were gathering like storm clouds, and the legal battles stretched ahead like an uncertain road. But tonight, in their lamplit cabin, 3 people who'd found an unexpected configuration of happiness held tight to what they'd built. The mine might make them wealthy. The fight against corruption might make them famous. But this quiet moment of connection, this chosen family that defied easy categories, this made them whole. As they prepared for bed, moving through their evening routines with practiced ease, Boone reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. False letters had led to true love. Deception had revealed integrity. An attempt to steal had resulted in a community united in generosity. "No regrets?" he asked, as he did sometimes when the weight of their choices pressed heavy. "None," Sati and Rosalie answered in unison, as they always did. And in that certainty, that bedrock of mutual commitment, lay their greatest defiance of all. The simple, radical act of being happy on their own terms. The candles were extinguished one by one, leaving only starlight to silver the windows. In the darkness, 3 hearts beat in rhythm, 3 souls rested in peace, and 3 minds dreamed of futures that others couldn't yet imagine but that they were determined to build. Tomorrow the fight would continue. Tonight, love was enough.